God says, a $5,000 heavenly deposit is ready for your account. Daily prayer. Faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Hebrews 11, verse 1. There's a message that has been stirring hearts and lighting up prayer circles. God says, a $5,000 heavenly deposit is ready for your account. And when you hear that, something inside of you, maybe the childlike faith that still believes in divine surprises, wants to shout, I'll receive it. But then there's another part of you, the part that has wrestled with overdue bills, that knows the weight of responsibility, that has tasted disappointment. And that part quietly wonders, could this really be true? It's a real question, especially here in 2025, when even the basics can feel out of reach, when financial uncertainty lingers in every household, when families feel stretched thinner than ever. We know what it's like to pray for provision late at night, with the future heavy on our minds. And into that very world comes this extraordinary promise of a heavenly deposit. It feels like hope pouring into an empty cup, doesn't it? Like a lifeline thrown into stormy waters. But what if it's not just about money? What if that $5,000 represents something bigger, God's assurance of breakthrough, peace, and supernatural provision? What if this promise is far more real and far more powerful than numbers in a bank account? Today, here on the Journey of Wisdom, let's unlock the meaning of this heavenly deposit and discover how it might change everything for you. The $5,000 metaphor, redefining divine currency. So, what is this $5,000 heavenly deposit? Let's think about it this way. Consider the number not as cash, but as God's unit of value. He doesn't trade in dollars and cents. He trades in transformation. That heavenly deposit might not show up on your bank statement, but I promise you, it will show up on the statement of your life. It's a metaphor for a breakthrough that has a value far beyond what we can count. We've been trained to look for blessings in one particular form, money. But what if the provision we need, the real treasure, is arriving in a different currency? Think about it. There is a deposit of clarity. Have you ever been stuck on a problem for weeks, turning it over and over in your mind, feeling completely lost? And then, maybe in the shower or on a quiet drive, the solution just appears. A moment of absolute clarity, a clear path forward that you hadn't seen before. You make a decision based on that insight, a decision that saves your business or helps you avoid a catastrophic mistake that could have cost you tens of thousands of dollars down the road. Isn't that a deposit worth more than $5,000? That's a divine currency. Or consider a deposit of peace. I mean real peace, the kind that settles over your heart in the middle of a storm. You get the bad news, the diagnosis is worrying, the family situation is chaotic, but instead of panic, a strange and powerful calm washes over you, a quiet assurance that somehow it's going to be okay. That peace allows you to think clearly, to support your loved ones, to get a full night's sleep after weeks of anxious tossing and turning. The world can't give you that, and no amount of money can buy it. Think of the cost of anxiety, the doctor's visits, the medication, the lost productivity, a deposit of peace that guards your heart and mind. What is the real value of that? It's priceless. Sometimes the provision comes as a deposit of connection. You're struggling to find work, sending out resume after resume into the void. Then, out of the blue, an old friend you haven't spoken to in years gives you a call just to say hello. You mention your situation, and they say, "You know, my company is hiring. Let me put in a good word for you." Or you're sitting in a coffee shop, wrestling with a personal problem, and you strike up a conversation with a stranger who, it turns out, went through the exact same thing and offers a piece of advice that changes everything for you. These aren't accidents. These are divinely orchestrated appointments. A key person at the key moment. That's a heavenly deposit. What about a deposit of resilience? This is the one we often don't recognize as a gift until we look back. It's the inner strength that rises up within you when you thought you had nothing left. It's the ability to get back up after you've been knocked down, to face another day after a heartbreaking loss. It's not about being tough, it's about being held. It's that supernatural grit that allows you to keep putting one foot in front of the other, to keep your family together, to keep believing when everything tells you to give up. That strength, that fire in your soul that refuses to be extinguished, that is a deposit straight from the heart of God. It's the power to endure, and it's worth more than all the gold in the world. And perhaps the most powerful of all is a deposit of forgiveness. This might be the hardest one to accept. It's the grace that enables you to finally let go of a hurt that has been poisoning your spirit for years. The ability to forgive someone who isn't sorry, or maybe even harder, the ability to forgive yourself for a past mistake. You've been carrying this heavy weight, this bitterness, and it has been affecting your health, your relationships, your joy. And then, through prayer, through reflection, a release happens. The chains break. You feel light for the first time in a long time. That freedom opens up space in your soul for creativity, for love, for new beginnings. How can you put a price on that? You can't. So I invite you to ask yourself a different set of questions. How much is an idea that could change your career worth? How much is one good night's sleep after months of worry worth? What is the value of the strength to walk through a trial without falling apart? What is the price of the ability to mend a broken relationship? When we start looking for God's provision in these forms, something amazing happens. We realize we are not impoverished. We are incredibly wealthy. We realize we are not being ignored. We are being provided for every single day. The heavenly deposit isn't something we are waiting for. It's something that is already here, waiting to be recognized. The nature of the provider, beyond the transaction. So, as we begin to open our eyes to these different forms of divine currency, these deposits of clarity, of peace, of resilience, it naturally brings us to a much deeper, more personal question. What does this understanding reveal about the nature of the provider himself? For many of us, if we're being honest, our spiritual life has been quietly shaped by an unspoken assumption. It's the idea that our relationship with God is, at its core, transactional, a kind of cosmic economy of cause and effect. If I perform well, if I am good enough, if I pray with enough passion or follow the rules with enough precision, then, and only then, will the blessings come. It's a framework that turns faith into a formula and reduces the mystery of the divine to something resembling a celestial vending machine. We learn which buttons to press, which prayers to say, which actions to perform, and we stand back, waiting for our chosen item to be dispensed. But if the provision we truly need is something as intangible and life-altering as a moment of profound peace in the midst of chaos, or the inner strength to forgive a deep wound, then that whole transactional model begins to crumble. You cannot earn peace. You cannot achieve resilience through sheer willpower. These are not wages paid for a service rendered. They are gifts. They are sustenance for the journey. And this realization begins to shift our entire understanding, moving us away from a God who rewards transactions to a God who provides out of his very essence. It's not just what he does, it's who he island. Let's take a moment and sit with the imagery that Jesus himself used in the Gospel of Matthew. He invites his listeners, people burdened with the anxieties of daily survival, to simply look around. He says, "Consider the birds of the air." Think about that. These creatures are the embodiment of freedom and fragility. They don't operate on a 5-year plan. They don't sow seeds or build barns to hoard their resources. Their existence is one of pure, moment-by-moment trust. And yet, Jesus points out, they are fed. Then he says, "Consider the lilies of the field." These wildflowers, which bloom for a day in breathtaking beauty and are gone tomorrow, don't toil or spin thread. Yet they are arrayed in a splendor that surpasses even the most magnificent robes of a king. Now, it would be easy to misinterpret this as a call to be passive or irresponsible, to simply sit back and wait for life to happen to us. But that's not the heart of the message. This isn't about neglecting our duties. It is a profound invitation to recognize and trust in a benevolent order, a loving intelligence that is woven into the very fabric of creation itself. The sun doesn't rise each morning because we performed a ritual correctly the night before. It rises because it is in its nature to give light and warmth. The birds are nourished not because they are morally superior birds who have earned their daily meal, but because it is in the very nature of their creator to sustain the life he has brought forth. To put it simply, the provider's nature is to provide. It is the constant, unwavering expression of his character. This truth, if we let it sink deep into our souls, should bring an incredible sense of comfort and release. It means we can finally step off the exhausting treadmill of spiritual performance. We no longer have to live with that constant, low-grade anxiety of wondering, have I done enough? Am I worthy of help? We can find rest in the knowledge that the source of our provision is not our own fluctuating efforts or our inconsistent goodness, but his constant, unchanging, and generous character. Our relationship with the divine is not a contract. It is a covenant. It's not a business deal. It's a relationship. It is far more like a master gardener tending to a cherished garden than a boss evaluating an employee. A good gardener doesn't just provide water and sunlight to a plant when it's behaving well or producing beautiful flowers. The gardener's care is constant. They nurture the plant through every season, through the budding spring, the fruitful summer, the dormant winter. They provide what the plant truly needs for its long-term health and growth. Sometimes that means Providence 6. Other times, it means pruning away dead branches, a process that might feel painful to the plant, but is essential for its future vitality. The gardener's actions are always motivated by a deep, unwavering desire for that plant to become the fullest, healthiest, most beautiful version of itself. In the same way, the provision we receive is always tailored for our ultimate flourishing, even if it doesn't always look like what our immediate desires are asking for. This understanding also frees us to see provision arriving from the most unexpected places. Let's think about the ancient story of the prophet Elijah. It's a tale of a man at his absolute limit, physically exhausted, emotionally drained, hunted by his enemies, and hiding alone by a desolate brook. He is in a season of profound scarcity and fear. In this desperate moment, God doesn't send a rescue party or a wealthy benefactor with a cart full of supplies. He sends ravens. According to the ancient laws of Elijah's people, ravens were unclean birds, scavengers. They were the last source anyone would expect help to come from. Yet, every morning and every evening, these unlikely messengers brought him exactly what he needed to survive: bread and meat. The lesson here is incredibly powerful for us today. If we are only looking for our provision to arrive through the proper and predictable channels, the expected promotion at work, the approved loan from the bank, the support from the people we think should be helping us, we are very likely to miss the ravens. We might fail to recognize the help that is coming to us through a surprising conversation, an unconventional opportunity, or the kindness of a stranger. This story calls us to cultivate a spirit of open-handedness, to release our tight-fisted control over how our needs must be met. It invites us into a deeper trust, an admission that the Creator's imagination and resources are infinitely greater than our own. When we finally let go of the transactional model, our spiritual life transforms. Faith becomes less about anxious striving and more about peaceful abiding. It's less about trying to earn a blessing and more about learning to simply trust the blesser. It allows us to be brutally honest in our struggles, knowing that His support is not withdrawn when we feel weak, lost, or full of doubt. In fact, it is often in those very moments of utter vulnerability, when we have nothing left to offer, that His provision shows up most clearly and beautifully. We stop trying to prove our worth, and we simply learn to open our hands and receive the sustenance that has been flowing towards us all along a current of grace that originates not from our merit, but from the very heart of a loving and ever-faithful provider. Developing spiritual eyes. How to recognize the deposit. So, if we accept this beautiful truth that the provider is always providing, and that His provision comes in countless forms beyond just money, it leads us to a very practical and empowering question. How do we get better at seeing it? How do we develop the spiritual eyes needed to recognize these deposits when they arrive? Because it's one thing to know in theory that these blessings exist, and it's another thing entirely to experience them as a daily reality. The truth is, most of us walk through our days with a kind of spiritual blindness. We're so focused on the static of our worries, the noise of our to-do lists, and the ache of what we lack, that we become completely deaf and blind to the subtle, beautiful ways that grace is showing up all around us. Think of it this way. God's blessings are like a radio station that is broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The signal is always there. The music of grace is always playing. The problem is never with the broadcast. The problem is that our own radios are often tuned to the wrong frequency. We're tuned into station WORRY or station SCARCITY. The work, then, isn't to convince the broadcaster to start playing the music. The work is to learn how to adjust the dial on our own souls. Gratitude and mindfulness, simple, intentional presence, are the very acts of tuning that radio. So, let's talk about how to do that. This isn't complicated or mystical. It's about cultivating a few simple, life-altering habits. The first, and perhaps most powerful tool, is the gratitude journal. I know you may have heard of this before, but I want you to think of it not as a self-help trick, but as a spiritual discipline. It's the act of becoming a detective for grace. Here's how it works, simply. Every evening, before you go to sleep, take out a simple notebook and a pen. For just 5 minutes, instead of letting your mind race with the worries of tomorrow, intentionally scan your memory of the last 24 hours. Your only job is to find 3 specific, heavenly deposits you received that day. And they don't have to be dramatic. In fact, it's better if they're not. Maybe one was the unexpected compliment from a coworker that lifted your spirits. Maybe it was finding a parking spot right in front of the grocery store on a rainy day. Maybe it was the taste of your morning coffee, the warmth of the sun on your face, or a simple, quiet moment where you took a deep breath and felt a sense of peace, even for just a second. Write them down. Be specific. Don't just write, "I'm thankful for my family." Write, "I'm thankful for the way my spouse looked at me after dinner today." This simple act does something profound. It retrains your brain. It teaches your mind to actively search for and notice the good, to look for the evidence of provision instead of constantly scanning for threats and deficiencies. Over time, you stop being someone who looks for grace, and you become someone who sees it everywhere. The second practice is what I call the practice of the pause. Our modern lives are built on a foundation of constant momentum. From the moment our alarm goes off, we are rushing to get ready, rushing to meetings, rushing through emails, rushing from one task to the next. In this state of perpetual motion, it's impossible to notice the subtle whispers of God. Blessings rarely shout, they almost always whisper. So, we need to intentionally create moments of stillness. You can set a quiet alarm on your phone for 3 times during the day, maybe 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 5 p.m. When it goes off, you stop whatever you're doing for just 30 to 60 seconds. That's it. You don't have to say a formal prayer. Just stop. If you're at your desk, turn your chair and look out the window. Notice the shape of the clouds. Notice the color of the leaves on a tree. Listen. What sounds do you hear that you were tuning out just a moment before? The hum of the computer, the distant sound of traffic, the chirping of a bird. In that brief moment of pause, you are creating a space in your soul. You are interrupting the tyranny of the urgent and making room for the eternal. You'll be amazed at the insights, the moments of peace, and the small beauties you begin to notice when you intentionally build these sacred pauses into your day. Finally, this all comes down to asking a different question. Most of us, by default, go through life asking a version of the same question. What's missing? What do I need? What problem needs to be solved? It's a question rooted in a mindset of lack. And when you ask a question of lack, your mind will diligently find you answers of lack. It will point out all the bills you can't pay, the opportunities you missed, the ways you're not measuring up. The spiritual practice here is to consciously, intentionally flip the question. Start your day by asking, where will I see God's provision today? And throughout the day, keep asking a new, better question. What has God already placed in my life, right here, right now? Instead of, how am I going to get through this problem? Try asking, what strength or resource has God already given me to face this? This isn't about ignoring reality or pretending problems don't exist. It's about changing your starting point. It's about approaching your life not as a detective for deficits, but as a treasure hunter for grace. When you begin to ask this new question, your perspective shifts. You start to see the resilience He's already built in you, the connections He's already placed around you, the small moments of beauty He's already scattered along your path. You realize the provision isn't something you have to beg for. It's something you simply need to open your eyes and receive. By practicing these simple habits, you are not just hoping for a deposit. You are learning to live in the midst of a constant, gentle, and abundant flow of heavenly grace. So, as we bring this first part of our time together to a close, we can see a new picture emerging, the $5,000 heavenly deposit. It may not be about something that arrives in an envelope or shows up on a bank statement. Perhaps its true purpose is to fill a different kind of account, the account of your soul. It's not a one-time event we wait for, but a constant, gentle current of grace that flows through our lives every single day. The provision of clarity, the gift of peace, the strength of resilience, these are the real currencies of a life lived in faith. And the best part is, they are available to us right now. The broadcast is on the air. We just need to learn how to tune in. And that's a journey we don't have to take alone. We learn so much from one another's stories. So, I'd like to invite you to be a part of that. Take a moment and think about your own life. I would love for you to share your experience in the comments section below. Just answer this simple question. Was there ever a time when a heavenly deposit that wasn't money, like a sudden idea, an unexpected meeting, or a moment of profound peace changed a day, a week, or maybe even the course of your life? You never know who needs to read what you have to share. Your story of a small grace could be the very deposit of hope that someone else needs to receive today. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I hope you'll join me for the next part of our conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because in our next session, we're going to explore the incredible power of daily prayer, not as a way to ask for things, but as the practical way we open our hearts wider to receive all these good gifts. Daily prayer, cultivating the soil of the soul. Welcome back. In our last conversation, we journeyed together into a profound and beautiful truth, that God's provision is all around us, often hiding in plain sight as deposits of peace, clarity, connection, and resilience. We learned that the great work isn't about earning these gifts, but about developing the spiritual eyes to recognize them. But knowing a treasure exists is one thing. Having the key to the treasure chest is another. It's one thing to see a beautiful garden, and another to have fertile soil in your own heart, where those seeds of grace can actually take root and grow. If gratitude is the practice that opens our eyes to see the blessings, then daily prayer is the gentle, steady act of cultivating the soil of our soul, making it a place where those blessings can truly flourish. Now, for so many of us, the topic of prayer can bring up a lot of anxiety and confusion. We carry this quiet worry in our hearts, asking ourselves, am I doing this right? Is there a secret formula I'm missing? Why does it sometimes feel like my prayers just hit the ceiling and fall back down? I think much of this struggle comes from a misunderstanding of what prayer is for. Perhaps, for too long, we have approached prayer like a shopping list we send up to heaven, a list of demands and requests. But what if prayer is less about asking for things and more about alignment? What if it's less like a monologue and more like a dialogue? In this next part of our journey, we're going to explore prayer not as a transaction, but as a transformation. We'll discover it as the daily practice of tuning our hearts, like an instrument, to the gentle, life-giving rhythm of the divine. It's the bridge that takes us from simply recognizing God's goodness to truly receiving it, allowing it to change us from the inside out. The architecture of prayer, beyond the wish list. To begin, let's think about prayer as having a kind of architecture, a structure that makes it sturdy and spacious, allowing it to hold the full weight of our human experience. For generations, people of faith have found it helpful to think about prayer in 4 distinct movements. This isn't a rigid formula you have to follow, but rather a gentle guide, a framework to help us move beyond a simple wish list and into a richer conversation. Let's walk through these movements together, not as a set of rules, but as an invitation. The first movement is adoration, which is really about connecting to the source. Now, the word adoration might sound a little formal, like something reserved for old hymns and stained glass windows. But at its heart, adoration is simply the act of looking outside of ourselves and acknowledging a beauty, a power, and an order that is vastly greater than our own immediate problems. It's not about flattery or trying to say the right things to get on God's good side. It's about perspective. So, how do we practice this? You can start by simply observing something magnificent and letting it fill you with a sense of wonder. You might watch the sunrise and notice the incredible palette of colors painting the sky. You could pick up a single leaf and marvel at the intricate network of veins that sustains its life. Or you could simply reflect on an act of profound kindness you witnessed a stranger helping someone in need. Adoration is the moment you stop and say, "Wow." It's the act of placing our small, personal anxieties into the vast context of the universe. When you start your prayer not with your problems, but with the grandeur of the Creator, something shifts inside of you. Your problems don't necessarily disappear, but they are put in their proper place. You remember that you and your struggles are part of a much, much bigger story. The second movement is confession, which is about clearing the channel. Again, this is a word that can carry a lot of heavy baggage. We might associate confession with guilt, shame, and a sense of being judged. But I want to invite you to think of it differently. Think of confession not as a self-flagellation for your sins, but as a courageous act of radical honesty with yourself and with God. It's about acknowledging the static, the internal noise, the emotional clutter that is blocking your ability to connect. This is the moment in your prayer where you get real. It's where you drop the masks and the pretenses and just speak the truth of your heart. It might sound something like this: God, I have to be honest. I am struggling with jealousy today. I saw my neighbor's success, and it made me feel small and resentful. Or, I'm carrying around so much anger toward that family member, and I know it's poisoning my spirit. It could even be, I am paralyzed by fear about the future. The what-ifs are screaming so loudly in my head that I can't hear anything else. Confession is like opening a window in a stuffy room. It's the act of sweeping out the dust and debris from our inner world, the resentments, the fears, the hidden prejudices, to create a clean, open space where light and grace can enter. It's not about earning forgiveness. It's about accepting the freedom that comes from finally telling the truth. The third movement, which flows so naturally from this, is thanksgiving. This is about watering the seeds of grace. We talked a lot about gratitude in our last session as a way of seeing the deposits, and here, in prayer, it becomes the way we affirm them. This isn't just about being polite to God. It is a powerful brain-reshaping practice. When we intentionally give thanks, we are actively training our minds to look for evidence of goodness, to focus on what is present rather than what is absent. In your time of prayer, take a moment to specifically look back over the last 24 hours. Don't settle for a generic, "Thank you for everything." Be specific. Find the small, concrete deposits. Thank you for the taste of that first cup of coffee this morning. Thank you for the patience my partner showed me when I was irritable. Thank you for the difficult conversation that, even though it was hard, led to a new understanding. You can even give thanks for the lessons learned through a mistake. Thanksgiving reinforces the reality that you are, and have been, provided for. It builds a foundation of trust and contentment, which completely changes the posture from which you make your requests. And that brings us to the fourth and final movement, supplication, which is simply about voicing your need. Notice that this comes last, and that's intentional. After you have recentered your perspective through adoration, cleared your heart through confession, and grounded yourself in gratitude, you are now in a much better place to articulate your needs. Your requests will no longer come from a place of panic or entitlement, but from a place of humility, trust, and clarity. And even here, we can approach it differently. Instead of just praying, "God, please give me that $5,000, which is a prayer focused on a specific outcome, you might find yourself praying for a different kind of provision. You might pray, "God, please give me the wisdom and clarity I need to navigate this financial challenge," or "Please grant me the patience to endure this season of waiting and to trust in your timing." You might even pray, "Please just show me the next right step. Open the one door I am meant to walk through." This kind of supplication is a collaboration. It's an invitation for God to work in you and through you, not just for you. It acknowledges His wisdom and sovereignty, releasing you from the burden of having to figure everything out on your own. By embracing this simple architecture, adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication, our prayer life is transformed. It becomes less of a frantic plea and more of a peaceful, grounding, and life-giving conversation. It becomes the very means by which the soil of our soul is prepared to receive the infinite and varied deposits of heaven. Praying through the seasons of life. Having a structure for prayer is incredibly helpful, but we also have to be honest about the fact that our inner lives are not always neat and orderly. Life is cyclical, it has seasons, and our prayer life will naturally and rightly change its shape and texture to match the season we are in. A prayer that feels authentic and life-giving in a season of peace might feel hollow and impossible in a season of grief. The beauty of a mature faith is that it makes room for all of it. It doesn't demand that we feel a certain way to come to God. It invites us to come exactly as we are, in whatever season we find ourselves. Let's talk about what prayer can look like in some of these different seasons of the soul. First, there is prayer in the desert. This is perhaps one of the most difficult and disorienting seasons for people of faith. This is when you feel spiritually dry, empty. It's when God feels distant, silent. You go through the motions of prayer, You say the words, but they feel like they just hit the ceiling and fall back down, empty. There are no soaring emotions, no profound insights, just a quiet, aching sense of absence. Our first instinct in the desert is often to panic. We think we've done something wrong, that we've been abandoned. We try to force feelings that aren't there, which only leads to more frustration. The wisdom for this season is gentle. Don't try to manufacture an emotion you don't feel. Instead, this is the time to practice what some have called the prayer of presence. It is the simplest, most stripped-down form of prayer. It may just be sitting in silence for 5 minutes, and the only words you speak, either out loud or in your heart, are, "I'm here. Even if I don't feel you, God, I'm still here." That's it. This is not a prayer of failure. It is a prayer of profound faithfulness. It is a testament to a relationship that is based on commitment, not just on feeling. Just as the ancient writers of the Psalms of Lament cried out in their confusion and sense of abandonment, your quiet, persistent presence in the silence is one of the most powerful prayers you can offer. It honors God by trusting that He is there, even when all your senses tell you otherwise. Then, there is prayer in the storm. This is entirely different from the desert. The storm is not empty, it is overwhelmingly full. It's when life is chaotic, when you are hit with one crisis after another, a health diagnosis, a financial emergency, a family conflict. Sometimes they all come at once. In these seasons, you are so flooded with adrenaline, fear, and confusion that the thought of sitting down for a structured, reflective time of prayer feels utterly impossible. Your mind is racing, your heart is pounding, and you can barely form a coherent thought. The good news is, you don't have to. The prayer for the storm is the prayer of desperation, and it is just as holy. When you are so overwhelmed that you can't organize your thoughts, your prayer can become a single word, breathed from the depths of your being. Help, peace, strength. Think of the story of the Apostle Peter, who boldly stepped out of the boat to walk on water towards Jesus. When he took his eyes off his source of strength and saw the wind and the waves, he began to sink. In that moment of sheer panic, he didn't offer a long, eloquent prayer. He cried out 3 words, "Lord, save me." Sometimes, that is all we can manage, and it is always enough. Your short, guttural cry for help from the middle of the storm is a prayer that cuts through all the noise and reaches the heart of God instantly. Of course, there are also seasons of great blessing. There is prayer on the mountaintop. These are the times when a long-awaited prayer is answered, when a breakthrough happens, when you feel a deep sense of joy and gratitude. Ironically, these can be spiritually dangerous times because when things are going well, it's easy for us to forget our need for God. Our prayer life can become thin or non-existent. The prayer for the mountaintop, then, is what we might call the prayer of anchoring. It's about intentionally grounding ourselves in gratitude and humility so that the blessing doesn't lead to pride. It might sound like this: God, thank you. Thank you for this incredible gift. My heart is so full. Please, help me to steward this blessing well. Help me not to let it make me arrogant or forgetful of those who are still struggling. Show me how I can use this good gift to be a source of blessing and service to others. Remind me, always, that every good and perfect gift comes from you. This kind of prayer anchors us, preventing the winds of success from blowing us off course and ensuring that our blessings become a source of life not just for us, but for the world around us. Finally, there is perhaps the most vulnerable season of all. There is the prayer of groaning. This is for the times when the pain is too deep for words. The loss of a loved one, a devastating betrayal, a long season of suffering. In these moments, language fails us. There are no words that can adequately capture the agony in our souls. Trying to formulate a proper prayer feels like a betrayal of the rawness of our grief. In these moments, we are invited to simply be. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Romans, writes something extraordinary. He says that when we don't know what to pray for, the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. This is a profound comfort. It means that your tears are a prayer. Your wordless sighs are a prayer. The heavy ache in your chest is a prayer. You can simply allow yourself to sit in the presence of God, held in your sorrow, and trust that the very groaning of your spirit is a language that heaven understands perfectly. You don't need to explain your pain to the one who knows your heart better than you do. You just need to allow yourself to be held in it. Your presence, in its most broken and vulnerable state, is a holy offering. The unanswered prayer, wrestling with divine silence. Now, we must be honest. Any real conversation about prayer has to make space for its most painful and perplexing mystery, the unanswered prayer. There is perhaps no greater test of faith than to pour out your heart, day after day, week after week, sometimes for years, for something good and noble, the healing of a child, the restoration of a marriage, of relief from crushing debt, only to be met with what feels like a deafening silence. This is not the quiet desert where God feels distant. This is the profound ache of a specific, desperate plea that seems to go unheard. It can leave us feeling confused, angry, and deeply hurt. It can make us question everything we thought we believed about a loving and powerful God. There are no easy answers here. To offer simple platitudes would be an insult to the very real pain of this experience. But what we can do is sit with the questions together and perhaps explore some perspectives that might help us hold on to faith, even when we cannot hold on to a clear answer. The first perspective is that of time. Sometimes the answer we receive is not a no, but a not yet. From our limited viewpoint, we see only the immediate road ahead. We are intensely focused on our present pain and our urgent need for relief. But from a divine perspective, the entire map of our lives is visible. What looks to us like a frustrating and meaningless delay might, from a higher vantage point, be a crucial period of preparation or protection. Think of the ancient story of Abraham and Sarah, who were promised a son but waited decades, well into their old age, before that promise was fulfilled. Their season of waiting, as painful as it was a season of deepening trust and unwavering hope. A delay in the economy of heaven is not a denial. It might be the very space needed for circumstances to align, for our own character to be strengthened, or for us to be protected from a path that wasn't ultimately for our best. Another way to frame this is to consider the redefined yes. We often have a very specific idea of what an answered prayer should look like. We pray for God to remove a problem, to change our circumstances. But sometimes, God's yes doesn't change the situation, it changes us within the situation. We might pray earnestly for the healing of a chronic illness, and while the physical ailment remains, we are given a supernatural strength to endure it with grace and courage. We pray to be delivered from a difficult trial, but instead, we are gifted with an unshakable peace in the midst of that trial. We ask for a financial problem to disappear, but instead, we receive the creativity and resilience to navigate our way through it. From this perspective, the prayer is answered, just not in the way we prescribed. Perhaps the goal wasn't to give us a life free of problems, but to forge within us a character that is strong enough to handle any problem with faith. Maybe the truest answer to our prayer, "Lord, save me from this," is the gift of a spirit that can no longer be defeated by it. This is a harder blessing to recognize, but it is often a deeper and more lasting one. This leads us to a more mysterious and admittedly difficult concept, the possibility of a greater good. This is a perspective that requires immense humility. It's the idea that our individual stories are part of a much larger, intricate tapestry that we cannot fully see from our vantage point. If you've ever looked at the back of a hand-woven tapestry, all you see is a chaotic mess of tangled threads, knots, and seemingly random colors. It looks like a mistake, but when you turn it over, you see that every one of those threads was perfectly placed to create a beautiful and coherent image on the front. Perhaps, in this life, we are living on the back of the tapestry. We see our own thread of suffering, our knot of unanswered prayer, and it feels meaningless and chaotic. We cannot understand why this particular pain is necessary. This perspective gently suggests that our personal struggles might be serving a purpose in the grand design that is beyond our current comprehension. It doesn't erase the pain, not at all, but it can sometimes offer a small sliver of meaning, a trust that even this tangled thread has a place in the ultimate masterpiece. Finally, and this may be the most profound perspective of all, we can consider the invitation to relationship. What if the ultimate purpose of prayer is not to get what we want, but to get God? What if the deepest answer to our pleas is not a change in circumstance, but a deeper intimacy with the divine? Look at the story of Job in the Old Testament. Here was a man who lost everything, his wealth, his children, his health. He prayed, he questioned, he cried out to God in his anguish, demanding an explanation. For 37 chapters, he is met with silence. But then, at the end of the story, God finally speaks. And he doesn't give Job the answers he was looking for. He doesn't explain why he suffered. Instead, he reveals himself, his power, his majesty, his mysterious wisdom. And in that moment, Job's perspective shifts entirely. He says, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." The wrestling, the questioning, the painful silence, it all led him not to an answer, but to an encounter. Sometimes the divine silence is not an absence, but an invitation. It's an invitation to go deeper than the easy answers, to move past a faith based on getting what we want, and to discover a faith that is simply about being with the one who loves us. In the end, the deepest longing of the human heart is not for a problem-free life, but for a felt sense of divine presence. And sometimes, paradoxically, it is in the very heart of our most painfully unanswered prayer that we find that presence in the most real and transformative way. As we bring this part of our conversation to a close, we can see that daily prayer is so much more than a spiritual chore or a formula for getting what we want. It is the patient, faithful journey of cultivating the soul. It's the way we keep the channel of our hearts open to the divine, allowing us to recognize and receive His provision, not just in one form, but in all its varied and beautiful forms, and not just in one season of life, but through all of them. In the end, prayer is not about trying to change God's mind, but about allowing our minds and hearts to be changed by Him. It's not a magical incantation to pull heaven down to earth, but a sacred practice that lifts our spirits toward heaven. It is the bridge that carries us from simply knowing about God to truly knowing Him. Each person's journey with prayer is unique and deeply personal, and we draw so much strength from one another's experiences. To encourage each other on this path, I'd like to invite you to share a piece of your own journey in the comments below. The question is this: what is a short prayer or a single verse from Scripture that you often turn to as an anchor to hold you steady in difficult times? You never know the impact your words might have. The simple phrase that has been a lifeline for you might just become a beacon of light for someone else who is navigating their own darkness right now. Thank you for walking this path with me. I encourage you to continue to journey with us, because in our final session, we will explore the profound lessons that this life of faith teaches us about our shared human experience and what it means to live with purpose and hope in our modern world. Living the Deposit, ATI, Becoming a Conduit of Grace. Welcome back to the final part of our journey together. We have traveled quite a distance, haven't we? We began with the intriguing promise of a $5,000 heavenly deposit, a hope for a tangible solution to our very real-world problems. From there, our perspective widened, and we began to uncover a profound truth, that the provision of God is so much richer and more varied than we could have imagined, flowing into our lives as deposits of clarity, peace, and resilience. Then, we explored the gentle, steady practice of daily prayer, not as a means of demanding these gifts, but as a way of cultivating the soil of our souls to receive them. But the spiritual journey does not end with receiving. In fact, that is only the beginning. It's the start of the most important and transformative phase of our faith. And it brings us to the ultimate question, the one that all of this has been leading up to. The question is no longer, what can I get? The question now becomes, who will I become with what I have been given? You see, the purpose of receiving a heavenly deposit of peace is not merely so that you can feel peaceful. The purpose of being gifted with a moment of divine clarity is not just so that you can succeed in your own endeavors. The ultimate purpose of every good and perfect gift we receive is to transform us from the inside out, so that we can become conduits of that very same grace to a world that is desperately thirsty for it. This final part of our conversation is about moving from being a passive recipient of blessings to becoming an active participant in the circulation of divine love. It's about discovering how to live out the deposit every single day. The modern human condition, an ache for meaning in an age of noise. Before we can understand how to become a conduit of grace, we first have to understand the world we are trying to be a conduit in. To live a life of purpose, we must first be honest about the unique challenges and contradictions of our modern age, especially here in 2025. On the surface, humanity has never been more advanced. We possess technology our ancestors could only have dreamed of, comforts they never knew, and access to information on a scale that is simply staggering. And yet, if we are quiet enough to listen to the whispers of our own hearts and the hearts of those around us, we find a deep and pervasive sense of unease. There seems to be a growing gap between the quality of our technology and the quality of our lives. Let's explore some of the paradoxes that define what we might call the modern human condition. The first is what many have called the paradox of connectivity. We live in the most connected time in human history. With a few taps on a screen, we can interact with thousands of people from across the globe. Our social networks can span continents. We see the curated highlights of countless lives, vacations, promotions, happy family photos. But in the midst of this hyper-connectivity, study after study shows that we are experiencing an epidemic of loneliness. We have more friends than ever, but fewer true friendships. We have access to an infinite ocean of information, but we seem to be starving for wisdom. We communicate instantly, with emojis and short-form text, but we are losing the art of deep, patient, and vulnerable conversation. It's as if we have built a vast, intricate network of shallow streams, while the deep wells of genuine human connection are slowly running dry. We are connected to everything, it seems, except for each other and, often, ourselves. Flowing from this is the second challenge, the tyranny of the urgent. Our daily lives are governed by a relentless, buzzing sense of emergency. It's the constant stream of notifications on our phones, the endless inbox of emails all marked important, the back-to-back meetings that leave no room for thought or reflection. Our culture has confused activity with accomplishment. We live in a state of perpetual busyness, but rarely feel truly productive in the things that matter most. There is always something that needs to be done right now. This constant pressure to react to the urgent systematically crowds out the important. The important things in life, cultivating a relationship with a loved one, wrestling with a deep question, caring for our own soul, discerning our life's purpose. These things are rarely urgent. They don't beep or buzz for our attention. And so, They get pushed to the margins, always waiting for a someday that never seems to arrive. We live our lives putting out small fires, while the great, quiet work of building a meaningful life goes unattended. This relentless pace feeds into a third, and perhaps most damaging, aspect of our modern world: the performance identity. More and more, our sense of self-worth has become dangerously entangled with our performance. Our value as a person seems to be measured by external metrics: our job title, the size of our bank account, the number of followers we have, the success of our children, or the curated image of a perfect life we project to the world. This creates an exhausting and unsustainable pressure to constantly perform, to prove our worth, day in and day out. Life becomes a stage, and we are all actors, terrified of being found out as frauds. It fosters a deep-seated fear of failure, because if our identity is based on our success, then failure is not just an event, it is a judgment on our very being. It makes it nearly impossible to be vulnerable, to admit when we are struggling, or to simply be present in our own imperfect lives without constantly feeling like we are not enough. But underneath all of this, the digital noise, the relentless urgency, the pressure to perform, lies the most fundamental and unchanging truth of the human condition, and that is the arche for transcendence. This is the deep, innate, and universal longing within every human heart for meaning. It is the quiet but persistent whisper that tells us there must be more to life than this. It's the ache for purpose, for a connection to something larger, more lasting, and more real than our fleeting successes and failures. It is the search for a love that is unconditional, a peace that is not dependent on our circumstances, and a hope that can withstand the storms of life. This is the timeless, God-shaped whole that philosophers and theologians have spoken of for centuries. No matter how much technology we invent, how much wealth we accumulate, or how busy we keep ourselves, this fundamental ache remains. It is the very essence of our spiritual nature, calling us home. And it is into this paradox, a world overflowing with noise but starving for meaning, a people more connected but more lonely than ever, that we, as people of faith who have received these deposits of grace, are called to step. Our purpose is not to escape this world, but to bring a different kind of currency, a different way of being, into the very heart of it. Lessons for a modern life: stewarding the invisible wealth. Given this complex and often challenging landscape of our modern world, how then do we live differently? If we have been gifted with these heavenly deposits, this invisible wealth of peace, clarity, and resilience, how do we steward them? How do we invest them in a way that not only enriches our own lives, but also brings light and life to the world around us? It comes down to a series of conscious, daily choices. Let's explore 4 practical lessons for stewarding this invisible wealth in our modern lives. The first and most countercultural lesson is this: practice presence over productivity. Our world screams at us that our value is tied to what we produce, what we accomplish, what we check off our to-do list. The tyranny of the urgent, as we called it, keeps us in a constant state of distraction, always thinking about the next thing. The heavenly deposit of peace is the direct antidote to this. So, when God gifts you with a moment or a season of inner calm, the way you steward that gift is by consciously choosing to be fully present. What does that look like? It means when you're home with your family for dinner, you invest your peace by putting your phone away, truly away, not just face down on the table. It means you make eye contact. It means you listen to the story your child is telling about their day, not as an interruption to your thoughts, but as the most important event happening in the universe at that moment. When you're talking with a friend who is struggling, you invest your peace by giving them the uninterrupted gift of your full attention, without thinking about the 10 other things you need to do. Your focused, undistracted presence is one of the most sacred and healing gifts you can offer another human being. It says to them, "You matter more than my productivity." In a world starving for genuine connection, your presence is a treasure more valuable than any accomplishment. The second lesson is to cultivate compassion over comparison. The engine of our modern social world, especially online, runs on the fuel of comparison. We scroll through endless feeds that present curated, filtered versions of other people's lives, and it's almost impossible not to measure our own messy, behind-the-scenes reality against their public highlight reel. This inevitably leads to feelings of envy, inadequacy, or even a subtle sense of pride. It's a game with no winners. So, when you receive a heavenly deposit, perhaps a deposit of confidence from a personal success, or a deposit of contentment in your own journey, the way you steward it is by turning your focus outward with compassion. Instead of using your good season to feel superior, use it to develop a tender heart for those who are still struggling. When you see someone posting about their achievements, practice the discipline of being genuinely happy for them, silencing the voice of comparison. When you see someone posting about their struggles, resist the urge to judge or offer simplistic advice, and instead offer a quiet prayer or a simple word of encouragement. Remember that behind every screen, behind every carefully crafted image, is a real human being who, just like you, is wrestling with insecurities and longing to be seen and accepted. Your compassion, fueled by the contentment you've received, becomes a healing balm in the wound of comparison culture. The third lesson is to choose courage over comfort. Many of the most valuable heavenly deposits we receive a brilliant new idea, a moment of clarity about a difficult relationship, a conviction to do the right thing require action. And that action almost always involves stepping out of our comfort zone. Comfort whispers to us to play it safe, to not rock the boat, to avoid risk. But faith is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act in spite of it. Therefore, when God gives you a deposit of courage or a clear sense of direction, the way you steward that gift is by taking the next small, brave step. It might mean using your voice to speak up for justice in a situation where it's easier to remain silent. It might mean having that difficult but necessary conversation to bring healing to a broken relationship. The legacy of a well-lived faith, more than just a deposit. In the end, we come to realize that the story was never really about the $5,000 deposit. That was just the invitation, the doorway that led us onto this deeper path. The real story, the one that truly matters, has always been about you. It's about your life. It's about the unique and unrepeatable mark that you will leave on this world. It's about your legacy. We spend so much of our lives accumulating things, possessions, accomplishments, titles. We work to build a financial portfolio, hoping to leave something tangible behind for our loved ones. And that is a good and noble thing. But the principles we've been exploring invite us to consider a different kind of inheritance, one that is not measured in dollars, but in impact. Many years from now, when your time on this earth is done and people gather to remember you, what will they talk about? They will not remember the balance of your bank account. They will not recall the model of the car you drove or the size of your home. Those things, which seem so important to us now, will fade away like mist. What they will remember is how you made them feel. They will remember your integrity. They will remember your kindness in a moment when they were struggling. They will remember the sense of peace and calm that you brought into a chaotic room simply by your presence. They will remember a piece of wisdom you shared that helped them navigate a difficult decision. They will remember the courage you inspired in them, the forgiveness you extended, the unconditional love you offered. That is your true legacy. That is the eternal deposit that you invest, day by day, into the hearts of humanity. The love, the grace, the peace that you receive from God are not meant to be stored in a vault. They are meant to be sown like seeds into the lives of every person you meet. So, let us live each day as faithful stewards of these invisible, invaluable gifts. Let us commit to the practice of recognizing them, of opening our hearts to them through prayer, and most importantly, of sharing them freely and generously with a world in desperate need. Because when we live this way, we are doing more than just living a good life. We are participating in the grand and beautiful work of God Himself. We are becoming His partners in the ongoing project of healing and redemption, helping to make this world one quiet act of love at a time, a little more like the one He always intended it to be. And that, my friends, is the greatest promise of all. Not that we will receive a deposit that makes our lives easy, but that we can become a deposit that makes the world better. That is a calling worthy of a lifetime. Our shared journey for this time comes to a close here, but the journey for each of you, in your own beautiful and unique life, is really just beginning. I want to sincerely thank you for giving me the most precious gifts you have, your time, your attention, and your open heart. It has been a privilege to walk this path of reflection with you. If you are still listening to this, if you've made it all the way to the end, it would mean the world to me if you would do one last thing. Please help me by commenting, "I'm still here," below. It's a simple way for me to know that there are friends and fellow travelers who have been on this journey from the very beginning. Your presence, even through a screen, is the greatest encouragement for me to continue sharing these stories and reflections. And finally, if this message has touched your heart in any way, I would ask you to consider sharing it with one person you know who might need to hear it. Let that be your first intentional act of becoming a conduit of grace today. I wish you a day filled with peace and new discoveries. May the very best heavenly deposits always find their way to you, and more importantly, may they flow freely through you. Thank you.